Welcome again as we start session 3, Legal Risks in Agritourism Ventures. So welcome everyone. We have a few of you on and there are others joining us. I did want to remind you that from our website you will be able to view the previous sessions. And if you've missed a session, you can go back. You can play them again if you want to. And that way, if you had any questions, you can also email me any questions that you might have. So today we are just recapping the first 2 programs. We had the financial risk session, and we had the production session, risks in both of those sessions. And in your notebooks, I'm hoping that as we go along, you're filling out the worksheets that have to do with your particular venture. So that becomes your risk management plan, and action items will come from that. So legal risk, as I was putting this together, it scares a lot of people. And sometimes it scares people from doing things in particular that bring people to the farms. But as we've spoken of before, you can share the risk, you can transfer the risk, and you can mitigate risks, and you can eliminate risks. So today we're going to look at, we will have our presentations, slideshow until about 10:45 or so. We'll take a break. Then I'm going to continue the YouTube video that we started last week. And we'll explore Welch Farms and what they do to minimize their risk, their legal risks. We'll go to Mitchell Farms, which is in the south, and it's really fun. And, oh, maybe. So we should have enough to do today. And then after those videos, I'm hoping that you can continue work on your plans, and we'll take it from there. So we'll get right to our first slide. Legal risks with visitors. Once you invite people onto your land, they're your responsibility. Ensuring that agritourists have a safe visit isn't just good business. It's good risk management. Now in New York State, we've had some great legislation in this year that the governor signed into law a bill that establishes limited liability protections for the inherent risks of inviting the public into a farming operation, such as you pick apple orchards, cut your own Christmas tree farms, and it does away with frivolous lawsuits when people say they have somehow been injured. Now, there's still a lot of things that you have to do to keep people safe, and we'll go over all that. But these are basically nuisance lawsuits that they are working toward removing from a problem, being a problem with the farm. And they want to encourage tourism, so this is one reason why that law was put into place, so that people feel more comfortable, farmers feel more comfortable getting into an agritourism business. So New York State encourages agritourism with this helpful legislation. It also applies to maple producers that welcome guests during open house weekends in March, wineries, and even horseback riding stables. But the law in general establishes clear standards regarding the things that farm owners and visitors are responsible for. Farms that clearly provide directional signs, instructions, and warnings about potential hazards, uneven ground, animals, machinery, are far less apt to be liable for injuries. The legislation, however, does not give farms blanket immunity, but offers some protection from lawsuits by an individual who takes no responsibility for his or her own actions. For example, customers should assume that there is some natural inherent risk in riding a horse, climb an apple tree, and act accordingly to avoid injury. So what it's going to come down to for our farmers is negligence. We have to avoid being negligent in any kind of situation. So first of all, in previous sessions, I believe it was the first session, I talked about an on-farm brewery that was shut down because they did not get the proper permits from their local town. And most towns do regulate business activities. Agritourism generally does not fall under the right to farm laws, as it is not considered farming. Farming is producing an agricultural food or fiber. It is not inclusive of tours, agritourism activities like having bed and breakfasts, those kinds of things are not considered farming. And they're not treated that way in the legal system or in the tax system. So from zoning to food safety, you will need to familiarize yourself with the laws that apply to your particular enterprise. You need to communicate with your local planning and zoning boards to make sure that you have all of the permits and or variances in place. Ignorance is no excuse when it comes to local laws. And the farm brewery that was shut down for a week, it was a financial hardship, but in the end, they had to mitigate the problems with the local community. That particular incident involved noise and not communicating with the neighbors and not involving a public hearing or anything regarding their new business. Even though it's a farm brewery, it is their activities included agritourism and farming. So you do have to make that distinction and make sure that that's the first place you stop when you are starting a business. So what are your liabilities with visitors, and how do you determine those liabilities? Well, we have to use the reasonable care approach, which requires a landowner to exercise reasonable care in any given situation. And we'll talk about this status of people coming to the farm, but I'm just going to say right now, the status equals duty approach is the duty of the landowner that varies according to the status of the injured person and the relationship of the landowner at the time of injury. So there are different statuses for different people that are coming to your farm. So they break them out into visitors could include trespassers, licensees, invitees, social guests, or recreational users. So we're going to elaborate on the kinds of people that come to your farm and your liability with each of these. Your duty of care. That means you are responsible as a landowner. It is different in every situation depending on who is coming. You have to use the reasonable person standard, and your duty of care changes with the person. If you have a breach of duty, it means that there's a failure on your part regarding your responsibilities with those visitors. A causation means your failure caused an injury. And damages, there must be actual harm that can be redressed. In other words, somebody actually has to get hurt. It has to be something that they can show. It has to be documented. And all that has to happen before you are brought into some kind of a legal action. So let's talk about the people that come to your farm. Who comes to your farm? Generally, there are three categories. Trespassers, which we only allow them the lowest duty of care. Sometimes you don't know they're there. You do not have to protect trespassers in general. A licensee. A licensee is somebody that may be an independent contractor coming to fix something on your farm, maybe an electrician, somebody who's doing something for you. You do have a higher duty of care than a trespasser, but less than an invitee. I mean, they're insured themselves. If they fall off their own ladder, fixing your roof, they have their own insurance. So a licensee is someone who is coming to do work perhaps and is not an employee of yours or an invitee. The invitees that you are open to, that you're asking to come to your farm, especially if they are paying for something in your agritourism enterprise, they are invited by you, and they require the highest duty of care on your part. And we're going to concentrate basically on this group, because in an agritourism business, these are the people that are going to be the most prevalent that are coming to your farm, and they do require the highest duty of care. So the invitee who is coming is invited in order to conduct business with you, the possessor of the property, the owner. They come on your land for your benefit, such as customers in your store or roadside stand. They could be employees, they could be students, they could be a business visitor, but they're coming to conduct business with you. You've invited them to your farm. Your duty is the highest level of care that you can give. And it's a general duty to use ordinary care to keep the premises reasonably safe for the benefit of these invitees. You typically show these people the most concern anyway. Yes, the customer is always right. And when they come to you, they're looking for a safe environment. Their expectations are that you've done your duty of care to make it a good place for them to come. So the status of the visitor invitee can change even when they're there. Now, this gives an example of someone coming. Someone might come to fish in your pond, but they explore other parts of your land. They may change from being an invitee to a trespasser, because you should hopefully have a sign that says, no one beyond this point, or closed, or whatever. But if you catch them and accept money for their access to the other parts of the land, they become an invitee. Now we have a money transaction. And the money transaction is key because it means you know that they're going to be in other parts of your farm, and you are accepting money to do those things. It's important to clearly define the area that visitors have permission to use. So we'll get to the signage and things, but it does come down to being very clear. And when you can't really be clear verbally and have that stand up in court, it has to be done with signage, with directions, with forms they might sign off on, anything that's documented. And so it's really important, and we'll get to this, that the visitors also understand where they can go and where they cannot go. So in the legal world, we have all kinds of liability in agritourism. We have premise liability, and that's your property. And that liability means that the property owner fails to protect people from potentially hazardous conditions. There could be product liability. Those are injuries caused by products prepared or served by the landowner. You could have property damage, a damage to property of the customer, the visitor, by your business or employee. You could have personal liability when a business provides a service and the service causes harm to the invitee. Employees, your employment status, employee or independent contractor, your employees can create liabilities for you, but proper training, and also they can also incur vicarious liability when a landowner is also responsible for actions of the employees and independent contractors. So what happens is when you bring in people to the farm, say you have a pumpkin picking day, and one of your employees somehow hurts one of the invitees, or you've got that guy fixing the roof and his ladder falls and hurts someone else. You know, those kinds of things can and do happen, but I just wanted to clarify that here. And you also have to make sure that you're documenting whether the person is an employee or a contractor, and make sure you're following all the rules, because that does create a lot of legal liability, even if they're seasonal, even if they're only working Saturdays. All those people need to be documented legally. So the premise liability, I'll expound on a little bit here. It's based on the notion of negligence. Negligence is the failure to exercise the care that a reasonable, prudent person would exercise in like circumstances. For example, a property owner fails to protect people from potentially hazardous conditions. A customer or visitor is injured on the premise. Examples are slips, trips, falls, equipment injury, animal-human contact. Anything and everything can happen to people when they come to your farm. But if you have the proper signage, and if you've done your duty and due diligence, sometimes the courts will say, well, you did everything that you could do to protect the people and your visitors. And if you had the signage up and this person was just trying to get into trouble or trespassing on other parts of the farm, remember, then the classification goes from invitee to a trespasser. So at the bottom we have duty plus breach plus causation plus damages equals negligence. So keep that in mind. Premise liability is based on the notion of negligence. What about product liability as it relates to agritourism? An example of a product liability is a person that became ill after consuming food that was prepared or served to him or her at the farm. There could be a foreign object in the food. The food could have undeclared allergens or have been labeled improperly. It could be spoiled. Any number of things could happen. So this is just one example of product liability when people are coming to your farm. If you have a bed and breakfast, your product liability could be a problem with the breakfast. If you have, I've noticed that in our area, we have a lot of tourism activities that are involved, and they're inviting food trucks to come in and take that product liability away from them because the licenses involved in food preparation and everything that goes along with keeping food safe is quite a learning curve, and not everyone is good at it or is properly licensed. So what I've noticed is subcontractors or food trucks are coming in, and the agritourism event goes on as usual, and the person in the food truck is assuming the product or food liability. So that has been a change that I've noticed locally, and I'm sure you've seen it too. So what if an invitee experiences personal property damage? For example, an employee hits a visitor's car in the parking area. This has to happen all the time. An animal crushes a visitor's camera. That could happen. A visitor ignored the no dog sign and a dog is killed by livestock. That could happen. If you can think it up, it could happen. So in the first example, when the employee hits the visitor's car in the parking area, you know, there could be tight parking. When we had the family farm day, people were parking on the road. People were parking all over. Some farms were inundated with more visitors than they could handle. So I could see that auto kinds of things could be a problem. But in that particular example, usually that ends up with the automobile's insurance coverage. Hopefully the farmer doesn't get involved unless they prove that there was some negligence on the care of duty in the parking lot. Maybe the spots were too small. Maybe the employee didn't have a driver's license. It's really hard to know, but that's usually handled somewhere else. An animal crushes a visitor's camera. Well, signage could prevent that. We also talked about in our last week's presentation the double fencing so that the animals are back a foot or two from the outside fence so that a visitor, even if they did drop their camera, maybe it wouldn't be stepped on. The no dogs thing, and that'll come up in the videos that we're going to see later. Pets, people's pets, and people take their pets everywhere. But I've noticed even on Family Farm Day that we limited pets. And it is a good idea to have a sign that says no dogs. Now, some people have guide dogs. So you just need to address that individually. Personal liability in agritourism. So the example here, it's a harvest celebration. An employee drops a pumpkin on a visitor's foot. An employee spills hot cider on a visitor. A person falls off a hayride and sprains an ankle. So all these things can and do happen. So this becomes a personal injury on the part of a visitor who has been invited to the farm. And so this is where your liability coverage comes into play. And it's so important to have liability coverage. The employee that spills hot cider on a visitor, that's a big problem. So perhaps having the cider at a lower temperature so no one can get burned. Have the visitor serve their own cider. There are a number of ways to mitigate that problem. The person falling off the hayride is a huge problem. And the state of Maine has had to look at hayrides very differently in the past few years. Unfortunately, I don't know what year it was, but I read about it at the time. A little girl, a child, was killed on a hayride. They fell off, and that was a hayride that did not, the wagon did not conform to any standard where there were sides. It was dark, these midnight hay rides or Halloween kinds of scary hay rides. So locally too, if your town or your county might have an ordinance about these things, I think the idea here is to put safety first. And we'll see some hay rides in our videos, have sides, have double chains on the wagons and tractors, don't take unruly people, make sure there's something to hold on to, and have a smooth road. So this is probably personal liability. People getting hurt is probably your biggest problem in agritourism. But what about employees? So what kind of concern do you show them? What kinds of jobs do they typically perform? How are they covered with insurance? Now, recalling that last video we showed last week, the employer gave their employees all gloves. They didn't expect that these folks had to bring gloves. They had gloves because they were picking up pumpkins that had spines and other things. And so it means making sure your employees have safe equipment, safe facilities, and proper training. Now, in the height of the season of agritourism, many times the college kids have got to go back to college, and there's still a lot of agritourism to do. Training is of extreme importance. It protects you as the employer, and it means that hopefully your workers' comp will be at a lower rate. Employers are responsible for employees' actions. So is the person on the farm an employee or an independent contractor? Everyone needs to recognize and mitigate and report risks and hazards. So in the case of the employee or independent contractor, there are rules that go along with that classification. And if this is a person that's just coming for the day and doing a horse and buggy ride or a horse and wagon ride, and you're paying them separately, it's up to you to find out, do they have their own insurance, their own liability insurance? And they need to provide you with a certificate of insurance and name you as an additional insured. Employees need training to recognize and report the hazards back to you. Okay, so in the training process, your employees need to know that they can report back and feel comfortable reporting back to you any hazards that they are seeing. They need to post and you need to post and implement the rules and regulations and incorporate workers' comp, of course. So those things are part of legal liability and agritourism, but the information presented on workers' comp, that's just every business, whether it's a farm or any other kind of business. So to manage your legal liabilities, you need to keep the farm safe for customers and employees. You need to select the proper business structure, and we'll get to that. You need to be a good neighbor, and you need to let your neighbors know that you have this business. There could be noise. You are going to try to mitigate the effects for your neighbors. There could be traffic. There could be people trespassing on their properties as well. So signage, keeping people corralled, having a plan when parking and visitors get out of control. And you also need to comply with all the applicable federal, state, local laws, permits, etc. Now, if you're doing something sporadically or just seasonally with a few people, you can consider the use of waivers. Now, if you do a zip line, and many people are getting into the zip lines, if you have the right property, it could work really well. People love to zip line. It's an inherently dangerous thing if something doesn't work right. But you could also, for that particular activity, consider the use of a waiver. Equipment can fail. People can be unruly and not follow the rules. But when they sign a waiver that's properly documented and developed, they realize right then that they're taking some of the risk onto themselves. Horseback riding might be another one to consider the use of a waiver. I've done both of those activities and signed waivers. So think about that. The record keeping is important because it might document maintenance on equipment, maintenance on those latches for your zip lines, maintenance of the line itself, anything, the wagons, the wheels, the greasing, the tractors, all of those kinds of things go a long way to make sure that you are providing the duty to your invitees. And also maintain appropriate insurance. Now, insurance companies are very interested in doing walkthroughs of your operations. They will see things you don't see. I've been on some walkthroughs with OSHA for large farms, and what they look at is totally different than what you might think about yourself. I've been through some good educational walkthroughs on some larger farms, and it's become a law for farms with employees over a certain number. So the OSHA walkthroughs document things like unguarded fans, unguarded equipment, ladders that are up and not where they shouldn't be, all kinds of things that you might say, well, that ladder's been there all the time. I need it every day. Well, you have to take it down and put it up every day. So on your agritourism business, the insurance company will feel much more comfortable if you allow a walkthrough and then mitigate anything that they deem necessary. So keeping the farm and visitors safe a little recap, employee training. If you have family working, treat them as employees. Make sure they're trained as well. Develop a farm safety plan that identifies hazards. Mitigation strategies and your plan of operations. Develop a food safety plan, or you can subcontract that out to someone else. Develop a risk management plan, which is what we're doing here today. Conduct routine safety inspections. Communicate with farm visitors, and develop a response plan for emergencies. So when you bring these folks to the farm, it's also good to make sure you're working with your emergency personnel. They know you're having a big weekend. They may even send out some traffic police. The fire department, for a donation, may direct traffic safely for you if you're having a big event. And also, they also may have some ideas for you when people do get hurt, if they get hurt. You also want to communicate with your farm visitors and make sure that they understand the rules of the activities. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about your forms of business organization and in order to limit legal liability. So this goes for any kind of enterprise that you are, starting up. And it's not specific to agritourism activities, but the forms of business organization are general enough that you can apply to your farm, your agribusiness, your agritourism, a food business, anything else where you could incur liability. So many businesses, when they're starting out, and historically farms, small farms have generally been sole proprietorships in the past, especially if they were production farms wholesaling a product like milk. In other words, the truck backs up every day, the milk is collected, and there's no marketing on the farmer's part. They're not selling milk off the farm. And their liability was pretty low as far as customers, because they're not processors. But New York State recognizes 7 different business structures, excluding organizations such as churches and nonprofits. So we'll talk about sole proprietorships. They're very simple to start up. You use your social security number, or your you can get an EIN if you like. You can have it just under your name. So an individual declares himself or herself a business operator. No paperwork is really needed to file with the government unless you do a DBA. And you establish this existence of the business. But the proprietor, sole proprietor, has unlimited liability for the actions and debts of the business. So it's the easiest one to start, but it's also, it can be the most risky as far as liability goes. The sole proprietorship is easy. Many people operate years and years and years without having any problems. It just depends on what the business is. Now, a general partnership is an agreement between 2 sole proprietors. No paperwork is needed to form this business, and partners still have unlimited liability. So they each have unlimited liability. I recall many professors saying the partnerships are the worst form of business organization. Don't ever get into a partnership. They can be troublesome. Disagreements are usually the worst thing about partnerships. The death of a partner means the partnership ends. Sometimes a partner has to buy out another partner. So it's probably not the best form of organization. They used to be more popular many, many years ago, and they're not very popular now. A limited partnership is also known as a silent partnership, where an individual joins a partnership but stays out of the management aspects of the business. For remaining silent in the operation, that partner generally obtains the profits of an owner but does not have the legal liability of a full partner. Sometimes we have limited partnerships when somebody still wants to be part of a business, but not, they might want to share in the monetary, but they're going to back off on the management. You see that sometimes in farm transfers, where the senior generation says, well, you know, I still want to share in the profits, but I'm going to let you run the show. I'm not sure how often that really happens, but we make room for that in the limited partnership. Then we have the limited liability company, and these are becoming, if you read the legals at all, very popular form of business organization. The reason they're popular is because the owners are limiting the liability of their own personal, they're limiting their liability in anything that they're doing. So it offers the limited liability of a corporation. The paperwork must be filed with the state, and that's why you have all those legal notices. In New York State, it's easy to follow. The Empire State Development website, when it's taking you step by step through forming a limited liability company. Now, it's really not that expensive to do on your own. You can hire a lawyer to do it, but the state of New York recognizes that, especially in agriculture and in the specialty food business and specialty products, that people want to limit their liability, their personal liability. And if you could just, you know, just peruse the legals any day of the week. The publication requirements are 6 weeks in 2 different papers. So you keep seeing the same one over and over again every week until they have published, and that is a requirement. They do have to reserve a name. That costs a little bit of money. They have to develop articles of organization. So in the end, it may cost under $500 to do a limited liability company on your own. If it's a simple enterprise and you feel confident, you could do that. If you don't feel confident, you could also hire a lawyer to do it for you. Now, the business C Corps with ag businesses, it's not as popular maybe in our area with small farms, but the ownership of the business is in the form of stock, and shareholders of that stock have different levels of control over the management. There's a board of directors. And they have limited liability in the company, but it's not as common in small businesses like I'm thinking that might be doing agritourism, but still possible. An S Corp is operated like a partnership and offers limited liability. So if you have a partner and you don't want to have a partnership, because I said they are the worst form of organization, you could have an S Corp. I believe there are more costs involved with S Corps. So look into that. A cooperative can work well. It really does depend on a lot of cooperation. An organization is owned by the members who contribute equity toward the business and share in the profits generated. And it's formed by filing with the state, and it has the similar governance as a C Corp with stocks, and your control is managed by how much stock you own. Voting is either 1 vote per member or in proportion to patronage of the cooperative. And members do have limited liability. And we do have a lot of cooperatives in New York State. Some of them market milk. Some of them have members that have invested in the cooperative. Some of them are marketing cooperatives. But they also do have limited liability, and that's a good thing. So I know that this slide is kind of busy, but throughout both of the sessions, remember, we want to mitigate transfer risk. We want to protect our assets. And we've talked about insurance quite a bit, but I didn't really get into the types of insurance that are out there that you may consider for your business. So I'll just review them quickly. Communication with your insurance company is paramount if you are offering an agritourism enterprise. So let's just talk briefly. We have general liability. So remember, it covers the people and property for which your farm is liable and mitigates your losses from lawsuits. So if you have someone get hurt, your general liability will be the part of your insurance that covers that person, especially somebody who's trying to follow the rules but somehow gets hurt anyway. Auto insurance, we talked about that. If we have trouble in the parking lot, generally auto insurance is covering your vehicles or your employees' vehicles too. Homeowners insurance, I think everybody knows what that is. Don't rely on homeowners insurance for anything that you're doing with agritourism. That protects your personal property, and there are certain things that are covered. Usually flood or earthquakes, we know natural disasters like that are not covered. Farm insurance, farm-specific insurance. I've had people start up small ventures that originally were just homes. They kind of morphed into livestock and other kinds of things, and had a problem with fire or lightning. The insurance companies need to know that you are a farm, and farm-specific insurance will cover farm problems, but homeowners will not. So if your animals get hurt in a lightning storm and you have homeowners, they'll say, well, I didn't know you had any livestock. You didn't communicate with me that you had animals. So keep that in mind as you grow. Don't rely on homeowners for a farm. Workers' comp, if you have employees or interns, they have to be covered. And that's, federal law. Product liability, we talked about product liability insurance. If you are manufacturing something, if you are handling something, somebody's eating a product that comes from your farm, product liability is necessary. Contract liability. This covers the assumption of the liability of another party through a contract or facility use agreement. You might be required to provide a certificate of insurance. So this is just an add-on that you can have on your policy. Environmental pollution insurance. This is a good kind of an add-on if you do anything with spraying crops, transporting a sprayer down the road, and that can be easily and reasonably added to a farm policy. Crop insurance is very important. We talked about crop insurance in our production section. If you are growing a specialty crop that you rely on for income, crop insurance is subsidized by the federal government. And it is reasonably reasonable, even though the premium may not seem reasonable. It is being subsidized, so it's reasonable if you have a large loss. And you do have to choose levels of coverage. So there is quite a bit to learn about crop insurance, and I would suggest if you are growing a specialty crop that you rely on for your income, that you look into crop insurance. I think everybody knows what life insurance is. We'll get a little bit more into that in the human resource section, and health insurance as well to protect the owners, and business interruption insurance. That is an insurance you could add on to your farm policy in most cases if something happens. So I was thinking about business interruption being maybe your storage facility burns up and all of the product was in there. You are not going to generate any money from that product, or you can't process a product. So business interruption has to do with some kind of event. Vendor's insurance, if that's generally if you're selling at a farmer's market or you're going somewhere else to sell your products off the farm. Umbrella liability coverage means that it provides a larger protection above and beyond your existing policies. Generally, they carry high deductibles. So just know some of those terms. When you get involved in agritourism, they will discuss all these with you. So, ways to reduce the liability in your agritourism business, your legal liability. If you have people coming to your farm, keep the property in good repair. Minimize or eliminate dangerous situations. This might include aggressive animals, manure pits, fencing off of those, moving vehicles or equipment parts, fence off hazards wherever possible, put up signage, make places inaccessible, completely inaccessible. Biosecurity is also recommended. Provide booties and hand wipes for visitors who enter barn areas, and actually make it convenient for them to wash on their way out. On their way out to the food truck. And when selling or serving foods, make sure all regulations are met and carry product liability if you're doing that yourself. Sometimes you can't do everything yourself. Try to keep that in mind. There are other people who do things very well also. And you could have vendors come and have food available, and they have their own vendor's insurance. But you have to make sure that they do, and you have a copy of it, and that you are listed as an additional insured. All workers on your farm are required to be covered by workers' comp, even if they work for free. So if you have interns, apprentices, employees, you're required to carry insurance for them. The only exception is if your farm is set up as a nonprofit. You should test your water supply annually for bacteria if your water is being used for washing produce, processing, drinking, washing hands. Negligence is when you fail to take normal steps to eliminate hazards, or you create a hazardous situation and do not address it. Avoid making false statements or publishing incorrect information that may damage a person's reputation, as this could cause a libel suit. Be careful of advertising claims or comparing your operation to others in a negative way. Manage your production techniques according to the recommended best management practices. So yes, you know that your place is the best, but you can't run somebody else's place down in the process. So being truthful in advertising is important. So I know I've given you a lot of information. I hope it doesn't scare you away, because remember, we can transfer the risk, we can mitigate the risk, And we can do a lot to make our farm safe for visitors and make money in the process. And risk management decision process never ends. It's ongoing. When you identify exposures, you evaluate your loss, you select the method that you want to fix it, you implement the method, and you monitor the results. So it is a circle. And pay attention. And now I think we'll take a quick break. I've spoken for a while, and we'll have until about 11:15. I'll come back with some interesting risk management videos that were done in different parts of the country, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. So we'll be back at 11:15.
Prevented us from having a crop, so hopefully we'll get back to that here in the near future. But our big event is we do plasticulture strawberries, and you can see this is one of our fields here with the row cover on it for the winter protection. And so we have folks come in for about a month out of the year to pick their own strawberries. And so I just, again, wanted to share a few things that we do on our operation to manage risk. And so a couple of things that we'll talk about is the legal structure of your business, insurance, and Gigi already touched on that, signage that Christy touched on, as well as the employee training, and then customer expectations when it comes to kind of that reputation aspect of your business. And so one of the things that I think it is important to do is to think about the legal structure of your business. And there are many options out there. And so you can be anything from a sole proprietorship to a corporation to a cooperative. The nice thing about legally structuring your business in an appropriate manner is it does provide some separation from you individually or personally and the business. And so I do encourage you to contact and consult with your attorney and your tax professional, because one of the biggest things that the legal structure of your business will affect and how you determine that are your tax liabilities as far as the business is concerned. And then the other one, again, depending on your particular situation, which structure might be most appropriate for your operation. And so it is important to get professional advice from both your attorney and accountant to make some of those decisions. In our particular situation, it worked out for us to be formed as a limited liability company, which again, when you legally structure your business in some aspects, such as a limited liability company, in the eyes of the law, then you personally are a separate entity from your business. And that is not the case with all the different structures. So again, talk to that attorney. The second thing that I think is really important to do, and I work with a lot of folks, small farmers that sell direct to consumers and at farmers markets, is to really ensure that you do have the proper insurance in place to protect any assets that you have. And as Gigi mentioned, there are different types of insurance. General liability, product liability, and workers' comp are the ones that I'm going to touch on here for this particular presentation. But the general liability are what we consider trip and fall. And so as you can see, again, this is one of our strawberry fields, and there are some, just being on a farm, you have some natural hazards. This is our irrigation line that can be a hazard as far as tripping is concerned as people are walking in and out of the field. And so typically in a situation like this where you can see that that hose is a little bit up off the ground, we might put a flag there or just make sure when we walk people out to show them where to pick to ensure that they are aware of some of these tripping hazards. This is a sandbag. We have sandbags out to hold our row cover down. I don't know why this particular one didn't get picked up out of the field at this time. As you can see, most of the other ones are gone. But again, it's a natural environment, and so there are things that are going to be natural hazards. And so again, to make sure that the insurance that you have covers the type of risks that you're trying to manage is important. And of course, the second one for us, since we are selling a consumable product, is product liability insurance. And so if you can see some of these little cuties here that come out and pick our strawberries as well, we have lots of families and friends that come out and pick. And of course, we do everything we can from a food safety standpoint to ensure that we're providing a wholesome product for our customers. But it's important also to manage the risk and make sure that we have that product liability in place as well. And so what you need to be sure and do is have that conversation with your insurance provider and be sure to tell them what it is that you are doing with your operation. Not only do we sell product and have the U-Pick operation on the farm, but we also sell at farmers markets as well. And so don't assume that your insurance provider knows what you're doing. Be sure to say that we are selling off the farm as well at these locations to make sure, again, that you have those proper coverages. And I don't think any of us as farmers want to risk the farm if something were to happen and we've come to find out that we didn't have the proper insurances in place. And then, of course, for us, the other thing is the workers' compensation insurance, and this goes along with training. As you can see, we use a lot of equipment. There's moving parts. It's hot, it's cold, it's rainy, all those kinds of things. And so we, in addition to the training that we do for our employees, we try to ensure that we would have the proper insurance in place for them as well in case there is an accident. And of course, we do what we can to try to manage those risks. And in a perfect world, we would not have accidents, but we all know that that's not the case. And so you do need to plan for those things. This is an example of our selling at our local farmers market. And as Gigi mentioned, one of the greatest risks that most of us take every day is getting in a vehicle and traveling down the road. And so, again, it's important to talk with your insurance provider that not only, again, are you selling there on the farm, but we're traveling to and from farmers markets to sell our product as well. And of course, when you're selling a product, you are benefiting. And so you're held to a little bit higher standards than just the general population because you are benefiting financially from the transaction. And so, again, to have those conversations with your insurance provider is really important. Christy touched on this as well, and really signage, again, to tell people where to go, tell people where not to go is a big thing that you can do to manage risk as well. Again, we have a food item, and lots of people think, oh, there's animals on the farm, so I'll bring mine with me. And so we've had to, over the years, really post the fact that we do not allow pets on our farm, and that, if somebody does bring a pet, how do we handle that? So that just takes a little bit of time to get folks educated about why we don't allow pets, because, a lot of us treat our dogs or cats as children, and so especially the dogs, they want to take them with them everywhere they go. And so, again, it just goes back to that education piece. Again, when we talk about not only customers, but again, if we would have to have emergency personnel come onto the farm, do they know how to get in? Do they know how to get out? Do customers know where to park and where not to park? And then this is for those of you that do produce produce, this is a template right off the Food and Drug Administration's website that they recommend that folks wash their fruits and vegetables before eating. And, of course, one of the big questions we get is, can I eat these out of the field? And so it's important that you, as well as your employees, know how to handle answering that question with your consumers, because we certainly want to imply that, yes, it is a healthful food, but we don't want to be, oh, no, you have to wash it before you eat it and this and that, and raise some red flags that maybe aren't actually there. So, again, educating your consumers and your employees is really important. And so, again, we do a lot of training with our employees on food safety. The equipment safety is another thing that we spend some time with our employees on, not in addition to the the heavy equipment, it's also mowing and weed eating and those kinds of things. And it's important, again, as Christy mentioned, that they have the proper safety gear, the ear protection, the eye protection, the gloves, and those kinds of things to help them stay safe while they're carrying out the work for us. Weather, of course, is always a concern when you're outside on the farm, and it amazes me the amount of people that want to pick their own strawberries when it's lightning outside. And of course, we do not allow that on our farm. So, but people still want to do it. So, how do we handle that? Is another situation that we have to inform our customers of our policy and our employees of our policy. And then just safety in general. And of course, we are in a farm environment. And of course, I put this picture of this little fawn that we found in one of our raspberry patches a couple years ago. And so we can encounter wildlife. And wouldn't it be great if it's all cute little fawns that are going to run away as soon as you get close to them? But, in reality, there are other things that happen. You might have a snake, or you might have a mouse, or those other kinds of wildlife. And of course, we do what we can to make sure that we keep them out of the strawberry patch and the blackberry patch. But anytime you're coming in and out of an area like a farm environment, you have the opportunity to encounter some wildlife. And what about skunks? Wouldn't that be terrible if you have this family come out and they happen to get sprayed by a skunk? Thankfully, we haven't had that happen, but it's those kinds of things that you have to keep in mind as well when you're working with your customers coming onto your farm. And then the last thing I just wanted to touch on again, because I do think it is risk management, is your customers' expectations. And so if we talk about product supply, we'll have customers get anxious for us to open for the season, and they'll come out, and of course you'll see some red berries hanging on the side of the bed, and they're like, why aren't you open yet? Look at all those ripe berries. Well, they don't realize that you get a few people going through there and picking those ripe berries, and nothing is more frustrating when a customer takes the time to come to our farm to get the quantity of fresh berries that they want, and there are not enough there. And so this past season, with the winter again the way it was, we had a very reduced crop. I mean, we had probably less than 50% of a normal, whatever that is, year. And so we had to go a little bit and do a little bit more diligence to make sure that we were managing when the customers were coming out to the farm to pick the product, because again, we have customers that come from all over, and nobody wants to drive an hour to be told, oh, we're out today, you'll have to come back. And so doing what we could to try to manage those expectations and communicate to that to our customers, and we did a lot of that through social media. And of course, the price and the quality goes right along with managing those expectations from consumers. And so that's kind of some of the examples from our particular farm, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well. So Madeline, I will hand it back to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Christy. Well, again, another great presentation. You brought up a lot of different ideas as well as some that we've heard previously, thinking about the legal structure and how the business is set up from the beginning to reduce some of those risks. Thinking about the insurance that we have available for our business to protect those things that do happen, even though we're taking many precautions. Pets is something I had not thought about. I was out at a pumpkin farm last fall, and there were actually several dogs on leashes at the pumpkin farm, which I was kind of surprised of, but I could sure see how they would not be that would not be reasonable for a strawberry farm in particular. So a lot of good things to think there. Both of the Christies had good thoughts about employee safety. So thinking about the employees, those people who are working on the farms, not just those who are coming to visit, was a really important point of the conversations as well. Thinking through some of those what ifs, I think all three of our speakers brought up those, and having a plan ahead of time of trying to go through the agritourism business and think about situations that could happen and planning ahead for what will happen if and when they do happen. So all very, very important points today. So we don't have any questions in the chat box at this time. Do any of you speakers have questions for each other at this time?
I think somebody did have a question. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Let's see.
So one of the things that I heard from our speakers again is thinking about that employee safety as far as the training. And I have a question for Christy Leeds on the employee training. Christy, you talked quite a bit about that. Could you tell us a little bit about the time it takes to train new employees or those that are returning for a season? What kind of investment in training do you give them up front, especially regarding the safety training?
Sure. We do a general training for all new staff. That's that's an evening, about 3 hours. It's an orientation to the farm, not specifically the station they might work at, but where all the people, where the first aid is, what you do in these kind of situations, where key things are located, kind of the overview kind of thing. Then we do some training. Then they divide off depending on what kind of an area they'll be working. If they're working zip line, for example, there's another entire half a day devoted just to kind of a general orientation to working on the zip line. And then they will spend some time at each station and actually work alongside another employee before they're ever completely on their own. They'll be trained by another person at each particular point of operating that particular thing. So they'll spend 8 or 10 hours in training in about 3 different phases before they're completely up to speed where they would be working a station by themselves. In our other kinds of stations, it's somewhat similar depending on what they're doing, but they'll always work alongside somebody who's worked that station. So after they get through the general information and all the kind of the knowledge stuff, and then I go through the station specifically with them, then they'll work alongside somebody who's done that station, so they have an opportunity to kind of see it in action. So many of ours are very action-oriented. It's very hard to just talk about it. You really need to see it in action, to be standing there and doing it. If you're going to teach somebody how to operate the pedal carts, it's really hard to just talk about that in theory until you're right there doing it. And then you say, here's how you show them how to operate the brake. Here's how you show them, here's what you say to bring the next person forward in line, and all those kind of things. There's a lot of specifics involved in each of those stations. So I guess those are just examples. They're so different, and that's where it takes a lot of time to do each section. If you're going to be the barn person around the animals, it's an entirely different training about animals and scooping feed and animal safety and all that than person that's driving the hay rides and person that's operating slides and person that's operating the pumpkin jump and all those kinds of things. But so we do some general things together and then split them off into sections that either one of us are doing and or other experienced employees will be doing some of that training as they get in their specific areas. The other challenge of that is then we tell our staff up front that we really hopefully expect them to be cross-trained in a couple of areas. So then they can't just jump from area to area. They have to have gone through the training to work in that specific area. So that's a challenge for us. We have about 60 people on staff when the farm is up and running, but they start out, all of them, in a particular area, and then ideally they'll get additional training as time permits to move around to some different areas. Most of them like to do that anyway, so they're happy to do it, but then we have to find the time to give them experience in driving or operating a particular thing when there aren't customers around. They have to get that training done before they can simply be assigned to work in that particular area.
Thank you, Christy. Those are really important points you brought up. And this is kind of on the business side of things, but when they are going through that training, is that something that is expected of them before they are able to be employed by you, or do you actually pay them for the hours that you spend training them?
They're actually paid. We don't really begin training until we've hired them. So we do an interview process prior and decide that they're going to be hired, and then we begin the training dates. And some are hired. We do an application type process where they tell us areas that they're willing or interested in working. We kind of make some decisions based on their experience, a little bit on age. Like, for example, on the zip line, they have to be at least 16, a minimum of 16, to work parts of that attraction, that area. So generally, if we do get some 15-year-olds, they're going to be assigned to another part of the farm and do the training in that area. And they may move there at some point in the future. So it's a little bit based on that, might be experience. We have we have a barrel train, or we call it the banana bus. So, and again, there's an age limit and some experience expected. You have to have a minimum of a driver's license to work that area, to drive that. It's actually kind of a lawnmower, a tractor kind of thing. But again, it's a high risk because it's a moving attraction kind of thing that kids are going to be in. So there's some criteria related to some, but yes, we are paying them for the time that they're training. Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. Good information there. We have a question about insurance, and I want to go back to you, Christy Welch. You had mentioned that there's different kinds of insurance needed for on and off farm. Could you tell us a little bit more about maybe some of those differences and how that works for you selling strawberries on the farm as well as at the farmers markets?
Sure, I'd be happy to speak to that, and I'll keep in mind that I am not an insurance person professionally, and so I always encourage folks to talk with their agent. But as Gigi mentioned, one of the biggest risks that we take daily is just transporting or getting in a vehicle and traveling down the road. And so one of the things that you have to ensure that when you are traveling to a farmer's market to sell your product, you're going to be on company time, for lack of a better term. And so do you, again, have the insurance, the proper insurance in place? So first of all, who are allowed to drive your vehicles? Do you hire people to go to farmers markets and sell your product for you? And if so, you need to specifically ensure that your policy allows those folks to be driving that vehicle, because that is a significant risk that we all take. And then just, it's different at a farmer's market. There's a lot of different things to think about because you're off the farm. Again, trip and fall, and of course, working with farmers markets, one of the most frequent accidents around the country at farmers markets happens if a big gust of wind comes along, somebody doesn't have their tent properly secured, and that tent goes flying and knocks somebody over or goes into a vehicle or something like that. In addition, then you also need to make sure that you have the product liability insurance in place so that if somebody says that they got a foodborne illness from consuming your product, that you are covered for that as well. And so you just really need to, I think, have a very upfront conversation with your insurance provider and let them know exactly what you are doing so that you can ensure that you're not risking everything that you have.
Yeah, those are good points. We do likewise, and we have our insurance agent on the farm regularly, particularly any time we're thinking about a new activity. In fact, we honestly start there, as difficult as that sounds. But if we're thinking about a new type of activity, if we can't insure it, then we can't do it anyway. So we have to start there and say, here's what we're thinking about doing, here's how it would work. And that's a great point, I think, is that they've got to know what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what, even in the planning stages of, as you're thinking about that. But we do that routinely also. So you've got to have somebody that you can work with directly.
Thank you so much, Christy and Gigi. We really appreciate all three of you joining us. It's been really interesting. I know everyone's learned a lot about agritourism and managing the risk involved with that. We are at the end of our time today, even though I'm sure we could continue with this topic.
Okay, I'm going to show a couple more. This next one is a little bit shorter. I just have to find it. I had them all minimized with tabs. Let's see if they're here. Let's take a quick break and I'll find this other one. It's a really fast moving one, and I want you to pay particular attention to the topography and a couple of other things about it. But I just need to find it again, and I know it's here somewhere. I'll stop sharing right now. We had them all set up in these little tabs under Internet Explorer, but I can't find them.
One might have gotten closed out, or maybe you went into your mail. If you're in your mail and you hit the back button. Oh.
Shoot. I had the links.
Yeah, just hit the back button. Maybe.
Oh, okay.
But you never lose it. It's always there.
Well,
you can't find it. It's always there.
Well, I had it set up in a shortcut. Let me see if I can find it now. Let me see if this is the one.
Horticulture and natural resources. Mostly focused on community horticulture.
This isn't really helping.
I'm still learning a lot.
I just can't do this. Let's see.
It's not opening by
I have it copied, but I can't,
Did you try the Control C Alt D?
let me just see, I'm trying to paste it into Internet Explorer.
Okay, I gotcha.
Okay.
You gotta just hit the whole thing and then
I tried.
delete.
that. I
Delete.
tried that.
Okay. Yeah,
It's not deleting.
here. I'm gonna go to a different site. Okay.
Okay.
Now we can.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like the backspace. Nothing's working. So it's not just you.
It's like my computer's froze up.
Let's just.
You can shut my mail. Well, I needed it for the link.
Let's try it in this program.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, that.
Jolyn Mitchell.
Oh, was that it?
Yeah, right here, right here.
Okay.
Okay, so we can share the screen.
Okay.
How do I do that? Let's see.
It's all webinar.
It's,
You can ask questions.
Let's go back in here, right?
oh,
Did you come to the other one? Yeah. Good, very good.
okay.
Well, you have to remember that we
Um,
wholesale, you know.
okay.
Right. Oh, we're not recording right now. We the wholesale, everything in. We have mega insurance, so I didn't realize that.
Well, we began in 2006. We started out very small. We had one small cotton trailer that we were using with square hay bales, and we actually pulled out onto the playground to pick up the kids. When Dennis and I, when we decided we wanted to do this, we were hoping to have maybe 500 or 600 people come that year. We really didn't know what to expect, and we ended up having about 5,000. So that kind of got everyone encouraged and enthusiastic about adding more things. We went, of course, after we had 1 year, under our belt, we knew that we needed to add more toys. We needed a pavilion, more bathrooms. Every school group that comes needs lots of bathrooms. But that's where we started. We started small, and every year since then, this is our 5th season, we've added something new. And we have a 10-year range goal that every year we hope to be able to add something new over the next 10 years. When we started out, I mailed letters out. I took a 60-mile radius of where we're located. We're in a pretty good location because we're 60 miles south of Jackson, 30 miles north of Hattiesburg, 30 miles from Laurel, and about an hour and a half from Vicksburg. So we were, had a pretty good wide range, and I mailed letters out to all the schools, just letting them know that we were opening a pumpkin patch, and we would love for them to bring their children out to learn about farming. Then we, of course, we advertised in the local papers, and we didn't have a lot of money to get started with. So I talked with my lady at the Chamber of Commerce. I work a lot with our local Chamber of Commerce, and she's been a lot of help. She has invited several people from the state to come down and tour our operation. And then our local newspapers have been real good. The local radio station, a lot of times you can partner with them. If you'll do a little advertising for them, they will in turn advertise for you. And just kind of getting the community involved in what's going on. A lot of times if you can get some of those, if they have children or grandchildren, if you can get them just to come for free, then they want to talk about it and tell everybody else. And that's kind of how we got started. Now this year we have advertised in some local magazines, but our best advertisement has been word of mouth. We want all of our customers to leave here happy and feel like they've gotten more than they paid for. And if they feel that way, they're going to go home and they're going to tell everybody that they know. They're going to go to church tomorrow, Sunday morning, and tell their Sunday school class, guess where I went yesterday? You've got to go. And that's our goal. It's not about making money. It's more about making memories and having fun. We do have a website, mitchellfarms-mississippi.com. That is our website, and it has been a great marketing tool for us. When I tried to talk my husband and them several years ago into doing a website, and they were not real enthusiastic about it, but we have several people that call every day that have just been scanning. We had a group from Norway just a few months ago that came because they found us on the website. They were just Googling farms in the United States, and they come across our farm, and they were going to be in Dallas, and they thought, oh, we'll just drive over to Mississippi. Fall Fun at the Farm is kind of what we've named this event that we have. We don't focus anything on Halloween. Everything we do is fall. So we decorate with lots of pumpkins and mums and pretty flowers. we try to encourage people to come out and make their memories at Mitchell Farms. But we give them a wagon ride tour of our farm, showing them some of the different crops that we're growing. We try to educate the children and the adults on the importance of agriculture. We talk to them about our corn, wheat, and soybeans that we grow, about our peanuts, some of the different uses for peanuts and the other crops, plus our U-Pick garden and how important fresh vegetables are to your health, and our fruits, and then of course our pumpkins. We try to tell them about growing pumpkins and make it fun. That's the tour that we give. And then we have a maize. We use Sudan grass as a cover crop on a lot of our fields, and we chose to use that for our maize. We may use corn one day. A lot of people, the corn mazes are real popular, but we do not get a lot of rain here, and corn needs rain. So until we can get some type of irrigation set up, we will have to use the Sudan grass because it does not take as much rain. Every year we choose a thing we want to go with, or the picture. And Stanley Wise, that works for Mississippi State Extension, he's the one that helps me cut my maize. I will always send him my picture and say, this is what I want, Stanley, you just make it happen. He's got the computer software program. I give him the plot of land, and he puts it in the software program and comes and he uses a GPS, and we cut it with a lawnmower. We cut it with a Skag lawnmower. But this year we cut it out in the design of Mississippi. We always try to have something educational. This year we used Mississippi, and I had interesting facts about Mississippi inside the maze for the kids to learn about as they were traveling through it. Then we have the pumpkin patch. Everyone gets to go to the field and choose a pumpkin of their choice. Then they have the playground they get to come back and play at. Most of the toys that we have at our playground are old farm things for kids to play on, something they wouldn't find at a regular school playground or a city park. Mostly just the sunshine, and we have some rope swings, and just to be able to run and scream and play. I mean, that's what most of the city kids don't get to do that, don't have an opportunity. And so that's one of the things we offer. We also have, on the weekends, we have 3 log cabins that are open for tour that are they're authentic log cabins, so most of them are not wheelchair accessible, but they are filled full of antiques and unique things Miss Nelda and Mr. Dennis have collected throughout the years. Favorite activity is probably the rope swing. We've got a big rope hanging about, 60 feet from a limb, which most kids my age or a little bit older grew up swimming in the creek and swinging on a rope. Kids nowadays have no idea. They come, and until you show them, they really don't know what to do. But we have 2 rope swings now, so the kids can swing on. That's their favorite toy. That, and also we have a huge culvert that we've used for a slide this year, and they really like that. During the week, we mostly have young children. We range from, I would say, 3rd grade and under, mostly kindergarten, preschool is what we have here during the week. Have a lot of parents that like to come out with them. But with the school children, we're on more of a schedule. We have it more scheduled out and planned, and talk to them a little more in detail about certain crops, whatever their age grade level is, things that they will understand and appreciate, and maybe go home. And I want them to learn something when they come. I don't want them just to come and have fun. I want them to come and learn something about farming. On the weekends, we have a different clientele. We have a lot of parents, grandparents that bring their children out, and they just want to see the kids have fun. So we try to have something for everyone. A lot of people ask us, what do you charge for adults and what do you charge for children? We charge one price. I haven't figured out who has the most fun, so I don't know who to charge the most to. So we just try to have something for every age. We take them 0 to 100, and I think everyone's having a good time.
No.
It's not.
No. Okay. Am I on still?
Yes, you are on and recording.
Okay, so we had a couple of inspiring videos and information from The Ohio State University and Mississippi State. These folks have done some really good quality productions, and to show you, how they're mitigating risk, how their enterprises are growing, how they've set goals, and they're really involved with risk management in all forms. Now, in the U-Pick, you did notice, you know, she pointed out the hazards. We could also pick out all kinds of hazards in our group with the last one. But as you noted, the school groups, when the children come out with their schools, you know, they're covered for those trips. So not that, that is a way to transfer the risk when you have groups coming out. So they monitor the children, and it was also very educational for that group. So we're going to end the day and give you time to ask questions in the chat box. You can work on your risk management plans. We'll be leaving the chat box on for a while. So if you do have questions, just put them through the chat and everybody can participate. I'd say we'll stay on until 12:15, and then we'll sign off for you to continue working on your plans at your sites or individually. And you can also review this particular segment probably by next week. So for now, we'll look for questions in the chat. I would like you to continue working on the sections. Our subject matter next week is a marketing risk, and we will have that at the same time. So good luck with your plans, and we'll talk next week unless there are questions.